did a fast sketch of this young boy. I did not talk through it, and I did not show the picture of him while I was doing it. I thought that since I had shown you this vintage photo that I have, that I would work from this photo this time and maybe talk through it a little bit more as I'm sketching. So I'm just going to get started. I'm working in this little blue book. I happen to be working back to front because that's how I started. I think I wanted to start on a blank page. There are line pages over here. I do work on the line pages. Don't bother me because I'm just practicing. Now, one thing when I start my sketches, right now I'm using this fine point Sharpie and this ink R2 roller ball pen. This is more of a gel pen. This is a cheaper pen, but if you ask me, it does every bit as good as some of the other pens, some of the other sketching pens, and the same for the Sharpie. I like the fine point on the Sharpie to do my sketching. So when I start my sketches, I like to think about the composition on the page. Now you can see this photograph, well, the man's face is just going to be smaller in this photograph than this page, so I'll probably get a good fit on it. Sometimes the photographs I'm working on are larger than even the page I'm working on, so I have to size it down. And I like to get a sense of composition on my page, so I may mentally, or even with the back of my pen, kind of figure out how I want the head and the shoulders to fit. I'm usually just sketching head and shoulders when I'm sketching the faces. Sometimes if I'm doing a study, like I'd mentioned before when I showed this photograph, that his ear would be a really good study. I'm not going to do a study, I'm going to do the full sketch. So I get a sense of the composition on the page. Maybe I'll just go, well, he'll fit in here. I just kind of get a general mental picture of how I want it to be on the page. That's nothing I can show you because it's happening in my head. So then I'll take the photograph itself and look at it. Now I do work mostly from reference photographs. Either something I found in the public domain online, or a vintage photograph, something I have in my collection. Most of these are in the public domain. So this guy, as I'm looking at it, as I said before in my last video when I was sketching this young boy, I showed this photograph because I wanted to talk about what I look for. And I look at the size and the shape of the head. Like I said last time, he's got a very high forehead here. He's got a little scant amount of hair here. He looks like he's got a little cowlick up at the top. And he's got a shock of hair coming out right above his ear. His ear, I said it'd make a very good study for an ear because it's very well defined in there. Of course, he's got a mustache. His eyes are, he's looking off at a distance. His head is turned slightly. His eyes are at a very slight, maybe 5-degree angle. And the ear, the bottom of the ear, you want to say that it comes in line with the nose, but if you do that, you're going to have an angle. So if you hold your pen perpendicular, you'll see that the bottom of the ear in this photograph falls almost in line with his upper lip. You can see a little shock of hair beneath his ear. He's got some definition on the side of his cheek here. He has, you can't see it too well because you are working from a photograph, so you are working with the lighting that the photographer had at the time, and this is an older photograph, probably in the 20s or 30s, or maybe even before that. Could be an 1800 photograph because it's a vintage one. So you're working with the lighting and the shadows and the shades that the photographer was able to develop on the picture. You can use your imagination for this, but I can tell from the shape of his head that he does have a fairly high cheekbone. It isn't well defined. He's got a lot of flesh on his face, so his cheekbones are not well defined, but I can tell that he's got a high cheekbone up here. He's got a well defined nose, maybe a little more shadow in there for me, and then a very well-defined neck with a collar, a round collar coming down. Seems to be a pleasant sort of a fellow. So let's get started sketching him. Now I'm going to talk while I'm sketching so that you can see what I'm thinking. Now I do tend to start with the top of the head, either the forehead, and I think I'll start with the top of his forehead here because, as I said, he's got a high forehead. And as you can see over here, he's got a well-defined, I don't want to say at his eyebrow, there's a bone above your eyes where your eye socket comes in, and you can see that. I don't know if you can see it, but I can see it. There's a curve here where his eye socket is, and then it curves up here with his eyebrow. So that's the part that I'm going to start with. Now, when I work on these faces, those are things that I think about. What things do I not think about is also important. And here's what I don't think about. I do not try to make these be photorealistic. If you think any of these in here, that I try to get a sense of them on here, but when I'm sketching these faces, I don't say I want it to be an exact representation of this. Now, that's not my goal. That's not my point. For me, when I'm doing these, for me personally, I'm sketching them because I like faces. I like to get the spirit of the face. And I learn. I learn every time I do a sketch. It's just one more learning experience. And sometimes I'm aware of what I'm learning and sometimes I'm not. It's just, it's practice, practice, practice. It's learning about the shape of the face, the relation of the ears to the eyes. And I keep saying it over and over and over again. It's just a learning experience for me. And that is why on most of my face sketches, I do not show you, I've stopped showing you the photograph. Because in my mind, I think the viewer is comparing as I sketch how close I am representing this to make it look like him, when that's not my goal. So I really stopped doing that. And I find that I'm more at ease. When I'm not showing you the photograph, I can draw a face on here and it really doesn't matter if it looks like the photograph or not. And it puts me at ease while I'm sketching. I'm going to show you the photograph here because I want you to see what I'm thinking as I'm sketching it. But do not expect this sketch to look exactly like this photograph, because I can tell you right now it won't. And I'm very happy with that. It may be a very close resemblance, and that suits me fine. That means I'm probably learning something. So I start out sketching, and as you can see, if you watch the video of this young boy, when I was sketching his chin in here, I noticed when I was editing the video that I made several lines in here as I was doing his chin, and then as I came back later, I made one single dark line to define it. So sketching sometimes is, for lack of a better word, sketchy. I want to make sure that you can see I'm going to turn it this way just a bit. Now I'm starting right up here at the forehead. I don't always start up here. I have a tendency to. Sometimes I'll start at the eyes. Sometimes I'll start down here over at the ears. Very rarely do I start at the mouth and work up. I need a good reference point. So I'm sketching the face here. The forehead comes down. And now I'm going to do that little rounded part of the eye socket right there. Right there. And then, now I may go back and redefine this as I'm sketching, but these are my initial lines in here. Now I'm at this point right here. I'm constantly looking over here as I'm sketching. And if you could see my face, you would see that. Now I'm going to put in some of the, just kind of lightly define his eyebrow, and the bridge of his nose comes down this way. Now he's got a very well defined nose, and noses are something that I am still working on, so I'm not saying that it's going to be perfect. Now I'm sketching the eye. You see how when I say sketching, sometimes I'll come in and I'll make several lines. A really, really good artist who, you know, my studies on drawing and everything, a really, really good artist who has a lot of confidence could make one line through here and get it perfect the first time. I'm not that good yet, and I don't mind the little sketchy scratch marks because for me, they eventually work in. Now his eye, you can see most of his eye here. So I'm going to kind of come like that, and he's got an eyelid that almost comes up to his eyebrow. Eyes seem easier for me to do. Now, the head on this drawing is already larger than the head here, so you have to be aware that as I'm sketching, I'm enlarging mentally. So, and then I like to put a little shading in the eyes just to kind of get them started. Sometimes I'll go back in and work on them that way. Now he's got some little shocks of hair coming out over here on the side. So I'm just mentally going back. Now I don't think I have this forehead exactly like I want it yet, but we'll leave it that way. For now, he's got a mustache coming down here. I think the mustache really defines him. And I'm just going to kind of sketch in that mustache. And the nose kind of curves down, and then he's got the nostril right here. Like that. Now, if you look at this eyebrow, you kind of see a little curvature in it. Best way to describe that, I guess, is to draw it, because it kind of comes down, the heaviness of the eyebrow comes down this way. That kind of gives him his expression, I think. But not too much. I probably have it too much in there, but we're going to leave it. And as I said, his eyes were probably at about a 5-degree angle. Now, mentally, I'm going this way. I'm not drawing a line. Some artists will use a pencil and actually sketch a line with a pencil and then erase it later. I like to work in ink. If I make mistakes, they are a part of the sketch. I'll flip to the next page if I don't like it. So, and then you can see I bopped up here and said, well, I want to put in his hair up here because he's got just a very, very light definition of hair. He's got a very high forehead. I think I'm probably getting that up there. Now, one thing that you know mentally, look at the space between these two eyes. Now, you got the bridge of his nose, but you also have in 3-dimension, if this had better lighting, because of the way the face is shaped on a 3-dimensional nose, there is actually, where the eye socket here goes in, there's actually more dark in there to make it more 3-dimensional. Here it almost looks flat, and that's just the nature of a photograph. But there's a lot of space between this eye, the left side of his eye here and the right side of his eye here. There's a fair amount of space, so I'm going to leave that there and lightly sketch in. Now I might change this because I find myself doing that a lot. Just kind of sketch it in. And this eyeball, because he's looking off over this way, this eyeball falls over to his right, as does this one. So there's more white space here and here. You can almost see his entire eyeballs. Not on every picture you can't, but you can also see a well-defined eyelid. And then there's shadow up in here. You just know there's shadow. And then I'm going to darken in. And yeah, there's a little white spot in there. So I think what defines this fellow is his mustache and his high forehead. Now I'm not going to get his ear in this sketch, because you can see I'm running out of space. If I had more space, his ear would come out over in here. But I'm not worried about that. It's just the way it's going to be on this sketch. I'm going to work on his eyes and on his... You can barely see his upper lip here. It's there, but you can barely see it. You can see his lower lip, because of the dimensionality of a face, has more shadow right under the lower lip. So right in here you're going to see just a teeny bit more shadow that defines the lip, and it kind of goes around that way. Just a teeny bit. And you can see his cheek kind of curves in this way, and then comes down for his chin. He's got sort of a square chin, but not totally. And then it comes down into his neck area here. Now, as I said, I'm not going to get his ear on there. I'm going to draw a little of it right in there. And then he's got that little shock of hair right down in there. And then he'll have some hair coming off this way. Now I'm going to do the collar, which is, you saw me draw that. Sometimes I'll just take my pen and very lightly make shadow lines in there just to give him some definition, and because of the way he's looking, I know this side of the face is in shadow too, so very lightly just make really fast shadow lines. And that's just the nature of a pen and ink drawing. If you were doing it in charcoal or smudging it or something, you could define it more. This is a pen and ink drawing. Sketch, I say. And his lip kind of falls down this way. You can kind of see that upper lip. And then he's got a chin, shadow on his chin in there. And here's his rounded collar coming around this way. And his neck comes out that way. You can see the rounded collar following underneath. Now another thing you think about when you're drawing, and I talked about this too, was the thickness and darkness of your lines. And this is something I like to play with. Of course, his mustache is normally going to be dark and thick. You got his collar coming down this way. So I'll skip around when I'm drawing these. Where my eye goes, there goes my mouth and my pen. Now his coat cuts everything off. And his coat here kind of falls in like that, and he's got kind of like a shoulder area. Now, the background of the photograph here is, of course, very light, but I like to make my drawings pop out. So I changed to my R2 pen, and I'm going to put in some dark shading. And most of these, you can see one here where I've shaded a lot. Well, here, well, that's her hair. Let's find one where I've shaded. I don't always shade. Here, I used, looks like a felt pen in there to darken it. In here, just very light lines. For her, see how I cross-hatched that? I use this R2 pen. That's what I'm doing here. And I like to make it really dark along the face, so it makes the face pop out. You can do this a lot of different ways. Yeah, I think I want his hair coming down just a little bit more like that. Very thin against his. And these are just scribbles. I'm not attempting anything artistic here other than getting a value, a shade in there. And sometimes I'll turn it and cross-hatch it. Cross-hatch means lines going this way and lines going this way. And if you want it really dark, you can do lines going the other way. Now I'm just working on a thin notebook paper, so this is not really a drawing paper, so it isn't really that heavy. But again, I'm just practicing. This is just my book of faces. Now I like that. Up in here, I'm not going to get much of his face in here. I'm going to get a shock of hair in there, but I'm going to put in some, and it's kind of hard to draw in here, but I want to put in some. Now let's go back and work on this a little bit more. I'm going to shade this very light lines in here just to create some shading in his eye sockets there. Does not have to be perfect. I'm not looking for perfection. To tell you the truth, I'm just having fun drawing. Let's put some shading in here. And a lot down in here. Now this is his whole neck area, so this will naturally be shaded. And you might see some shading in his cheeks over on this side. Shading right in there. Shading as his face comes down. Shading in here. Make a bow tie here. off the edge of the page, but that's okay. And his line, his color goes like that. Now this is just a result of working off of a wired binding. Sometimes it's hard to get your pen to do what you want it to. Let's define this area in here a little bit more. Now I know logically that his nose has, because it's a three-dimensional nose, I'm going to put some shading in here, just very lightly with lines. And underneath of his eyes in here. Now, I like to go back and work on the eyes. I put in some scribbles, but I like to darken them and just give them just a little bit more character in here. He's got a very heavy eyebrow. Sometimes even turning your sketch upside down can give you a sense of the composition. I'm very happy with the composition of this, except for I didn't have enough space to do this part of his head. But that's okay, we can do that another time. Forehead, I'm going to leave his forehead fairly untouched up here. I think that emphasizes the high forehead that he has. Maybe make some more lines in here for his hair. And of course his beard, mustache. I like these fine point pens because I can work with them with my shading a lot easier than I can some of the other pens. Now I'm just putting in some of the, defining his hair a little bit more. Now I'm just working on this area of his nose. I can tell that there's, because his nose is, again, three-dimensional, there's shadow right on the tip of his nose in here. Sometimes I mess that up. I'll put that a little bit more in shading in here. Now, I think I'm going to quit at this point. I think I'm fairly happy with it. But is it a photorealistic sketch? I would say no, but I think I have the spirit of it. I'm happy with it. I'm going to go ahead and sign it. And date it. August 5, 2016. And there we go. So, even though this was not really meant to be a lesson, I hope that as I talk through it, you can see what I'm thinking. So, I'll try to do this a little bit more often. I won't guarantee that I think the same thing all the time or I take the same approach all the time, because I'm constantly learning. But I'm very happy with it. I've done another sketch in my Little Faces sketchbook. I will see you on the next page.